Hey guys, it's Coach Gaglione here. This is another edition of our Training Through Pain series. Just quick disclaimer, I am not a medical professional, I'm not a doctor. I am a strength coach. I've been involved with powerlifting and coaching for over 13 years. So this is just going to give you some experience, some things that have worked for myself and our lifters in the past. If you are dealing with some serious issues, we don't advise you train into pain. And we recommend you see a medical professional, a physical therapist, or PT in your area. A good resource for that is clinicalathlete.com. You can find a provider, get an assessment, and get helped out. So, just moving on. So today we're going to talk about elbows. So the first thing is I would just get some sort of elbow sleeve. So these are just some old rebands. I like Mark Bell sells excellent sleeves for both elbows and knees. So besides the bench press, elbow sleeves are allowed in typically in most federations for the squat and deadlift. And typically elbow pain, usually, not all the time, comes from low bar squatting with a straight bar. So I always wear elbow sleeves for every squat workout I do, number one. So get yourself a pair of elbow sleeves. That is something I know, even like someone like Jen Thompson, she's one of the top benchers of all time. One of the things that she has all her lifters, her kids, even if they're younger, they always wear elbow sleeves to squat. That's like non-negotiable for her, and that says a lot for her. She's like one of the top benchers in the world. One of the things that she recommends to keep her elbows healthy is that every single workout that she does squatting always wears elbow sleeves. So that's something that kind of just stuck in my head when she was here for our Iron Sisters clinic a few years back. And if you don't know who Jen Thompson is, that's your homework for today. So number one is definitely get yourself a good pair of elbow sleeves. Don't be a hero. Another tip, there's this pretty cool idea. You don't need to squat with a straight bar all the time. I know specificity is all the rage, but there are other barbells that you could use. Most notably, we really like what's called a safety squat bar. Besides the benefit of saving your elbows and your shoulders, it's also going to change the mechanics of the lift to make the bar a little bit harder. There's also other things. So the safety bar you would kind of hold out in front of you. It'd be a little bit higher the load would be placed a little bit higher in the body. It would potentially throw you forward, but it's going to save your elbows and your shoulders quite a bit. A giant cambered bar is also another option as well. It's going to be a little bit easier on the upper body. There's other things like a buffalo bar. One of the more popular ones on the market is Chris Duffin's Duffalo bar. My only issue with the Duffalo bar for people that train, if you train at a gym like Gaglione Strength, the Duffalo bar is great because we could bring the hooks in and the bar will balance perfectly. If you are in a commercial gym or training out of a power rack, it does kind of it is a little bit cumbersome to set up and it will swing down on you. So that's just one thing to consider versus if you're kind of looking to purchase a Duffalo bar versus like a normal kind of buffalo or bull bar from like Westside Barbell, for example. So the Duffalo bar is going to have a slight camber to it, so it's going to be very, very specific. It's going to have a high transfer to the straight bar squat, but it's going to allow your arms to drop a little bit to allow your elbows and shoulders to be in a little bit better position. So this will go hand in hand with your shoulder health, but particularly elbows. The other thing that's kind of important to note when talking about elbow health and squatting is how you tension your upper back. So I want to talk about cueing a little bit, and I want to use the chest up cue for an example, which is a little outside the scope of this video, but just as an example, a common fall in the squat is folding forward, so a common cue might be chest up. The thing is that cue can go too far in the other way, so I don't want to be an excessive extension where my ribs are flaring. So is the chest up cue good or bad? It just depends. If the cue helps the lifter, if the cue gives the lifter the response, makes the adjustment that you want, then it's a great cue. So if I say chest up and now I go to a neutral spine, then the cue is effective. If I say chest up and I go to a ribs flared position, an overextended position, then that's in a broken, and I'm past neutral, that's no good, and the cue did not work. So a cue that I've used in the past, and I use a lot, is kind of elbows forward. Okay, so if I have a lifter, for example, who's especially a bigger individual, who tends to fold forward and the elbows tend to kick back, that kind of elbows forward cue can be very effective. So, but if someone is really flexible and they have a lot of external rotation in the shoulders, for example, if I crank my elbows too far past my midline where my wrist is not stacked anymore. In general, my elbow position should match or be very similar to my torso position on the way down. I don't think I can even do it, but you'll see some lifters who are hypermobile, their elbows will be past where their torso position is. So you can imagine if my elbow stayed here, but then my torso was like way back. So if my torso is at a 45-degree angle, in general, my elbows should be about a 45-degree angle as well. If my elbows are up too much, usually that's going to put me in a bad position, but I also don't want to crank my elbows too far forward. It's going to create a lot of torque at the joint here, a lot of rotational forces. So a better cue, but they have to understand what we're doing. So I will still use that kind of elbows forward cue from time to time, but in general, a better cue or a better way to think about it is doing a lat pull down with the bar. So I'm trying to literally bend the bar over my back. So I'm not really kind of driving my elbows forward and putting a lot of pressure on my elbow. I'm just getting them to where they need to be. And if I can lock in my lats, my elbows should be able to follow my torso effectively. So how you tension your upper back is going to be a big consideration when we're talking about elbow health. So if you're one of those lifters who really cranks their elbows forward, you're getting a lot of stability, but you're also putting a lot of force into the elbow. So consider how you tension your upper back for especially squatting. Same thing will go for benching. Another cue that is commonly overdone, tuck the elbows. I was one of these people. Actually, when I learned from my friend Vinny DiCenzo, he was one of the first people that taught me how to bench press, and I had a lot of great results learning from him, but especially when I was out of my bench shirt, I was one of those lifters who would tend to tuck my elbows too much, and my wrist and my elbow was not stacked anymore, so I was putting a lot of pressure on the joint. So like I think Mark Bell would call this kind of like the pterodactyl position. So like this like kind of pterodactyl position here, I'm over tucking, I'm overdoing the cue. So instead of thinking about tucking the elbows, if you want now if my elbows are all the way out here and I might say tuck to somebody, that's a great cue for them. But for a lot of people, especially women and lighter males and kids, if you say tuck the elbows, they're going to kind of get their wrists are going to come back, their elbows are going to come in too much. So a better cue would be bend the bar. So I'm bending the bar this way. Bend the bar, and you can see when I bend the bar, my shoulders will naturally depress and retract and pull it down. So bend the bar, pull it down. So instead of tucking and over tucking, bend the bar, pull it down. Bend the bar, pull it down. So we try to keep those cues, and you can see how the cues can transfer over to the bench, the squat, and even the deadlift. When I deadlift, I'm going to bend the bar this way. So when it comes to elbow health, look at your elbow mechanics. Okay, are we putting a lot of rotational force into the elbow when we squat and when we bench? Typically, if you clean up how you squat and you're not squatting with a straight bar all the time, you will have a good amount of elbow health. So that's the first thing, is just your technique, number one. So obviously mobility in your T-spine and your shoulders in general. So a good assessment, I would ideally want to do this on the floor, but just for the sake of the video, I'll do it standing. I would like to have my feet bent on the floor, so just for the sake of the video, I want to have my legs up, so my butt's going to be in contact with the floor. So I'm making sure I have enough external rotation. So if I can get my wrists and elbows flush to the floor while doing kind of a lat pull down motion, then usually that's a good indication that I have enough mobility to do a good low bar squat. If I can't, I'm going to need to bring the hooks in, and I'm going to need to grip it a lot wider. While I'm warming up, even though so typically my competition grip will be index finger on the ring. I like to warm up a little wider, and as my shoulders get a little bit more warm, I can bring the bar a little bit lower if I need to, and I can start to creep my hands in. So I don't always start, especially for bigger guys, I don't always recommend starting with your competition grip. Start a little bit wider, especially if you're doing the empty barbell. You don't need to have your tension all the way dialed up, especially in your upper back. Start a little bit wider, let your shoulders warm up a little bit. And that's another tip. If you're squatting, you still need to warm up and stretch your upper body. So make sure that your shoulders and your chest and the tissues of your pecs are prepared to externally rotate and get in and also extend the shoulders a bit closer to the midline. Okay, so start a little bit wider and then work your way in. You don't need to be like some of these Russian lifters that are super tight in here. Get to a position where it could be a little uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be painful. It should feel stable and strong. It shouldn't feel unstable. It shouldn't feel like the bar is getting too low in your back. So that goes into the next point. High bar, low bar, etc. Find a position on your back that you feel strong and stable, and it's not painful. Just because low bar is all the rage doesn't mean you have to low bar squat. You may not have the mobility currently to get in a real true low bar position. So find a bar position that is going to allow you to be in a good position. And this goes hand in hand with shoulder health as well, besides elbow health. Okay. So if for some reason you are lacking some external rotation, so like again, if I was lying, we could do some floor, we could do some wall slides. I like to do the floor slides, do these on the floor. So keep my wrists and elbows in line with the floor the whole time. So I'm just showing you, I like to do these on my back. I could do some soft tissue work for my pec. I could have a lacrosse ball here against a wall and work those positions. So I'm prepared for those positions to squat. Okay. If I need some T-spine mobility, I can come under the squat bar and I can pulse a little bit here. I'm keeping tension in my abs, I'm keeping tension in my glutes, so that way I'm getting more extension in my upper back. I could do this one also laying on a bench as well. This is the classic position to kind of do it. And I can kind of drop in here like on an actual bench itself. So any type of T-spine extension drill is going to be important to make sure I'm kind of prepared to get under the squat bar. Yeah, so the main thing, we want to have enough mobility in our shoulders, we want enough external rotation, we want enough T-spine extension. And the other thing is just soft tissue work above and below the joint. So if you watched our wrist video, make sure the tissue in the forearms is kind of worked out so you could do some stuff there. The other thing would be looking at the bicep and the tricep. So I could use a barbell itself, I could use a pain pull, I could use the cross ball. And right here my triceps are kind of sore. So this is a good way to get some relief. So I'm flexing and extending the joint. I can do one at a time. And I'm just kind of finding how, I'm not going on the joint, I'm just going on the tissue itself. I could also kind of roll a little bit if I want. If I was using a roller and stuff. So the barbell is a good tool for that. I can actually kind of roll. So if I was doing like the bicep, I can kind of come here. This is more of a pin and stretch technique. I'll do this on both sides. Donnie Thompson, he really likes, you could just use like a car buffer for your chest and your bicep as well. And that's going to kind of help open up the, I hate using some garbage words here, but you guys hopefully get the idea. Prepare the tissues in order to get in those positions for like the workout of the day. So should you ever wear elbow sleeves when you bench? I typically would advise against it just because you want to practice how you play, but if it allows you to get through your training, that's something to consider. For equipped benchers, I think there's less of a consequence. So like when I'm doing my raw work sometimes, when I'm going heavier, I will wear my sleeves before I get in my bencher because you're going to get some compression of the arm. But I always wear the elbow sleeves when I squat. I don't recommend, especially on your heavy days and your heavy training, I recommend training without the elbow sleeves because you don't want to get used to something that you're not going to be able to wear in competition. Same thing with like straps and the deadlift, same kind of idea. Like on your heavy singles, it doesn't really make sense, honestly, to use straps for heavy singles, in my opinion. I think if you're doing really heavy rep work, if you're doing AMRAP sets, if you're a strongman competitor and you're allowed to wear them in competition, it makes sense. But if you're doing like heavy singles and training, especially, you want to practice how you play. So that's my opinion on elbow sleeves. So that is basically it. So the elbows can be tricky. The other thing I would consider is just make sure you're doing some curls. We do a ton of extension in powerlifting, so make sure you're working your biceps in some fashion. Now, working your bicep doesn't mean this. So we want to get a full range of motion. So when we're working our biceps, we want to fully extend the arm and also get a little bit of, so one of the functions of the bicep is also shoulder flexion. So when we finish our reps, we're also going to come up a little bit as well. We don't need to do that all the time, but it's something to consider. One thing I really like to do as well, you can do this against a wall or like an incline bench, is doing an incline curl. This will really stretch, so I'm getting shoulder extension. So I'll do this against an incline bench or against a wall. I'm getting shoulder extension, and that's going to help stretch out my bicep a little bit more. So that's going to be really great for shoulder health. And then obviously, so that's like an incline curl you could do. Spider curl would be laying down. You could do this with a hinge position or lay it down across the bench. So I'm going to stretch my bicep, and then I'm going to get, so most of my tension is going to be here. So I could do a spider curl. So that's going to work the other end of the motion, and stretch, so it's going to stretch my arm this way. That's going to stretch my arm. An extension, so incline curl, and then also the spider curls, and this your traditional hammer curl. It'll get some blood in the forearm as well, and you can go a little bit heavier on those, which is always fun, right? Also good for a pump before you go out on Friday night, which is always good. So that's a little bonus tip that you didn't know you were going to get today. Just kidding, guys, but seriously, I hope the tips helped you. That's our elbows can be really tricky, so be patient with them. Especially if you're one of those guys that uses a straight bar all the time, you can actually learn something from some of the comms you get people on the West Side people. Like the variety is going to help, especially when it comes to your elbow health and squatting. You don't need to squat with a straight bar all the time. And if you really are against specialty bars, something like a Bow bar or a Duffalo bar would be a good compromise from time to time as well. So you're still getting that specific training effect if you're really into that sort of thing. But just make sure you're not sacrificing specificity just for the sake of your joint health, because the more overuse, the more you're doing the same pattern over and over again, it's going to be higher risk. So higher frequency and higher specificity, it's going to transfer better, but it's also going to be higher risk over time. So it's something to consider, especially when it comes to the smaller joints especially. So that's our video on elbows. If you guys enjoyed the video, please share it. Please subscribe for future content. If you want to support the program, you guys can check the links below on how you can do that. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.